chain that drives the clutch and transmission, once these became difficult to find at any price, and once the values of Indians had increased, it became worthwhile to reproduce expensive and non-renewable parts like outer primaries. Globalization was also an extra stimulus. For parts reproducers, lower labor costs in developing countries led to increased profits and increased diversity of parts. Most reproduction Indian pistons are now made in Taiwan, while most cylinders are made in India. But even with reproduced parts, restoration demands patience. In restoration, even if everything goes smoothly, everything, absolutely everything, must be taken apart, put together in mock-up, taken apart again, and reassembled again at least once. But restoration of a basket case means creating a bike from parts that had never been mated together before, and this introduces material challenges. For example, on Paul's 39 Chief, at first assembly, the front wheel was a 1/4 inch off center. Dismayed, he disassembled, and reassembled it 5 times, trying to make it line up. Each time it got closer, but eventually no room was left for improvement. Whether or not the wheel was that way originally, it will always be that way now. With a basket case, more problems arise, and restoration becomes even more demanding. Restoration requires patience and devotion. Restoration of a basket case bike, even more. Some restoration decisions are, however, aesthetic. They demand experience with historical styles and taste. Motorcycle companies like Indian offered options, as we said, in plating and paint. And when original paint and plating isn't known or desired, restorers have to decide for themselves. For example, wheels. Wheels could have the rims painted, cadmium plated, or chrome plated. In the 70s, most restorers favored the blue brightness of chrome, but during the Depression, most actual bikes would have featured less expensive options. So Paul opted for painted rims and cad-plated spokes. This was also an aesthetic choice. The black rims would look recessive, while the minor brightness of the cadmium could draw attention to the spokes, and together they would divert attention to the paint on the rest of the bike. In 1939, Indian, then still owned by DuPont, offered a 1-year only super fancy paint scheme in any 2 colors to commemorate the New York World's Fair. Because Paul's original paint colors were not known, he chose the 1-year fancy paint job. The combination of an elegant paint scheme with little bright work was intended to lend elegance to the streamlined forms of the bike's tanks and fenders. Aesthetic choices made just once, but considered over decades of expertise and observation. Restoring a motorcycle like this, as an enthusiast, is a labor of love and devotion. Labor costs are not recouped because they don't need to be. The extraordinary investment of time, energy, and skill is made for the love of the machines. For those financially at the lower end of the spectrum, enthusiasm-based restoration, rather than paid professional restoration, may be the only way to own and ride antique motorcycles. The 39 Chief, at this moment, is nearly finished, awaiting not skill, but the money required to finish it. $100 for a primary chain, $300 for a clutch. Materiality, even in odds and ends, can slow restoration projects' completion. In 1998, the Guggenheim Museum's exhibit, The Art of the Motorcycle, rocketed antique motorcycles from the world of riders and enthusiasts to that of wealthy, newly minted collectors, those who could afford to have their bikes restored for them and even over-restored. This fueled a cosmic kissing contest where motorcycles became more and more authentically, meticulously restored, to a point where machine screw heads were being faithfully copied from 1930s types long extinct. Once such perfection was achieved, there was no farther to climb up but down, and the collectible market opened to include unrestored original bikes. Though in principle, anything can be restored to look new, century, more people began to appreciate the fact that a motorcycle, or anything else, can only be original once. Because complete, unmolested original bikes in good condition are less obtainable, their very rarity stoked the market, escalating prices and the desirability of unrestored motorcycles. The final frontier and a sea change across the board. That interest in unrestored motorcycles, in turn, set the stage for a different kind of restoration. In the late 1990s, Paul acquired as a gift a thoroughly rusted and deeply pitted early Indian frame and front end that had been found by another enthusiast in a trash dump outside the desert ghost town of Goldfield, Nevada. An early bike was just what Paul wanted, but how to restore a bike this early and this far gone? The gift itself was a generous one. Parts that old are scarce and valuable, worth in this case several $1,000s. But the giver exacted a promise, a commitment to restore the bike that demanded money, restoration would cost many thousands, and time. It took nearly 10 years, along with skill and devotion. It was a project that would challenge and extend Paul's knowledge and abilities in new ways, involving new forms of making and different interactions with materials. Careful reconnaissance revealed the remnant of the bike to be a 1910 Indian, so Paul proceeded as before to accumulate appropriate parts. This was the era of Indians' dominance, but it was also a time before modern motorcycles. 1910 Indians have pedal starters like mopeds and no clutch. Because these bikes are today rare, and because they're not very rideable in contemporary traffic, you have to stall it out at every stop sign and then re-pedal to start it again. Few parts are made for them. The scarce original parts are so rare that even continual eBay searches turned up little. To source parts, Paul fell back on old-fashioned methods. For several years, he haunted antique motorcycle swap meets across the country. There he could talk to sellers of parts he did not need, asking them after parts he did need. People with large parts stashes rarely list everything online, so swap meets bring about not only connections to parts, but to connections to other enthusiasts and their parts. Over the years of searching, Paul eventually found 2 motors and proceeded with restoration. Parts acquisition, particularly for something this old and this rare, is a labor-intensive, skilled effort that can still not be accomplished entirely online. It involves building connections to other enthusiasts and always simple good fortune. But not all parts could be found. Those that, in restoration parlance, were made from that rarest of materials, unobtainium, would have to be fabricated by Paul just for this bike. Parts like the chain guard, the front wheel, the tail stand, rear fender, and fender braces, and even the rivets. In the case of the chain guard, none was available, original or repro, nor was one available for Paul to borrow and copy from another enthusiast. Looking at photographs and measuring the existing parts, he realized it was made of regular geometric shapes, and that by extrapolating from the photos, he could reproduce the part himself from sheet steel. Still, material obduracy intervened. His first effort failed. It was too small because the engine, which he didn't yet own, was not fitted to the frame to provide a reference. The second one was closer, but the third one finally fit and is today made it to the bike. Once Paul had accumulated a sizable number of parts, questions of just how to restore the bike emerged. The rust was, on the one hand, not desirable, but on the other, it lent the bike a luster. It also revealed its life history. By the early 2000s, this kind of patina was beginning to become a positive attribute, something not to be undone in restoration, but instead to be carefully retained. But not every part would come with such a patina. So Paul considered leaving the frame and front end rusted and then painting parts that were bought new, like the gas tank. But when other parts, like a rear wheel and a front fender, turned up in similarly rusted condition, Paul instead made a radical aesthetic and ethical decision to restore the entire bike as if it had been found in the desert, distressing or painting as distressed even parts newly made. exception, tires, which is a common exception even on unrestored bikes, in 1910 was completed in time for its 100th birthday. Today it looks every bit its age. The original and unrestored wheels and fenders appear indistinguishable in their rusty patina. In 2010, this was unusual in motorcycle restoration, but by 2015, such practices of antiquing had spurred broad interest. The aesthetics are those of our time, as we witness the rise in value and popularity of unrestored original antique vehicles, epitomized by the emergence at the Pebble Beach Concours d'Elegance, the fanciest car show in the U.S., of the so-called preservation classes. The ethical questions arise when such interventions remain undisclosed. As in art forgery and other forms of fakery, ethical violation manifests not at the point of creation, but at the point of presentation or sale. For Paul, the very artistry of his restoration efforts calls him to point to the distinctions. Can you tell which fender is original and which one Paul made? For him, the distressed appearance of the new materials marks not a forgery, but an artistic achievement of his restoration craft. The interactions of materials with skill, knowledge, aesthetics, and emotion. The 1910 also represents another transition experienced by enthusiasts, that from rider, user, to collector. Because this clutchless and nearly brakeless motorcycle is challenging, which means dangerous, to ride in modern traffic, Paul restored the bike not primarily to ride and never to sell, but just to have. Its life, through restoration, has a changed social value and a changed social role. As with other enthusiasts before him, Paul restored this bike not for use, but in devotion to his enthusiasm, for the love of Indian motorcycles. Amid a vibrant upsurge of scholarly works on both making and enthusiasms, we've sought to link the two by exploring restoration as a practice of making driven by enthusiasm and agentic materiality. The objects we have studied do something. The very materiality of these bikes has drawn around them a community of dedicated enthusiasts, loyal to the mark, who ride and restore Indians. And for Indian enthusiasts, this is a sensuous materialism. These objects are loved. Craft making like this is easy to romanticize, and the growing literature on making casts it in a golden glow. But this is not wrong. In a throwaway society, the fact that people can and do make anything just for the love of it is significant. And making is romantic because making practices reveal labors of love. More than 60 years after Indians stopped manufacturing motorcycles, thousands of antique Indians remain vibrant and running today. Looking at Indian motorcycle restoration reveals how material agency compels such devotion, attention, loyalty, care, and love, all sustained over time. Devoted enthusiasts, loyal to their mark and its very materiality, skilled craftspeople with deep historical and material expertise, situated in communities of enthusiasm even when laboring alone, can make anything. Restoration by enthusiasts is limited only by love. Thank you.
I see two cameras, at least one camera. There we go. I was in the middle of saying the word one.
Thank you. I'm happy to take a couple of questions before the time expires. Yes?
Just out of curiosity, do you know, or does Paul know, how many miles he's ridden on some of these bikes? Like, for instance, the Scout, did it have a preserved odometer, find out just how much it's really kept?
No, there's no way of knowing how many miles are on that bike from the time it was made in 37. And he's rebuilt the speedometer so it's been reset. So he doesn't know. He rode it for about 25 years. It was the only running bike that he had. He was riding it when I met him in 1984. And we used to ride around on the sports scout absolutely all over the place. He rode it really, really a lot for about 25 years. And then once he had other motorcycles, he had to share the group. So Scout has had the most miles of any of them. He has a post-war Chief that has had also really a lot of miles. It's been on long trips and stuff like that. It's a bigger road bike. But I mean, it's you know, it's in the tens of thousands, but it's probably not over 100,000. Maybe over the whole of its lifespan. But they're typically on antique vehicles, you really don't know what the mileage is. And unless you're buying an original vehicle, people don't care. If you're buying an original vehicle, original car, original motorcycle, and you want to say, look, it only has 20,000 miles on it. But once it's been restored, everything resets anyways. So then it doesn't matter. And also, if you're building a bike for parts, it really doesn't matter. But even if it's a together bike, then there's no way to know if that odometer worked the whole time, because these older odometers, they're always great. Long answer. Sure. Yes.
What got you interested in this at first? Was it an interest in motorcycles, or was this idea of devotion or growth, or how did you come about?
Great question. So her question is, what got me interested in this, or us interested in this, Paul and I? Was it an interest in motorcycles, or a devotion, or what was it? So, well, I gained the interest in motorcycles from the minute I met Paul. I was working as an apprentice carpenter in a punk rock clothing store, remodeling and storing drywall in 1984, and Paul rode the Sports Scout into the store. And that's how, it was sort of love at first sight for the bike and the man. And I guess he liked a girl with blonde dreadlocks who hung drywall. So I gained the appreciation for the motorcycles when I gained for the man at the same time. Though he had already had it for many years. The paper came about last summer. Some of you may be familiar with the paper that Paul and I co-authored about the restoration of a car that we own, a very rare car, that just came out last year in the Professional Geographer. And it was a Czechoslovakian car, and we started the idea of that paper because there was a conference of historical geographers in Prague, and we thought, what a great excuse to go to Prague. Let's put in a paper about our cars. Czech. They'll like it. And so we wrote this paper. It was really fun to work together. We hadn't co-authored anything before. Paul's, he's a motorcycle mechanic. He makes neon signs for a living. He's not an academic. He doesn't have a graduate degree or an undergraduate degree. But he's published work of history, so he's very interested in history. So we thought we'd write together. And we really enjoyed it. In that paper, we traced the biography of our car and its parts and showed how the geographies of restoration, parts coming from all over the world, traveling all over the world, how those geographies really mattered and how distinct they were from the geographies of making something new, from scratch when you build a car in the Toyota factory or whatever. So that was what got us thinking about that, and it also led us into the geographies of enthusiasm. And so then last summer, I was thinking about what did I really want to work on for the summer, and I really was compelled by the issue of enthusiasm and restoration. And I thought, hey, let's take 3 of the motorcycles that Paul has restored. Between the 2 of us, we have about 24 motorcycles now. So we carefully thought through which bikes would tell the story of the evolution of Indian motorcycle restoration over time and the different challenges that restoration demanded. So we selected these 3 bikes as case studies and then developed the paper over the course of the summer. And then I had to cut it down by 2/3 to make it into a presentation. So it was something that we've been working on in different iterations since like June or something like that. Does that sort of answer your question?
No, it really does.
So it's really, the other thing was, what I really wanted to do, and this maybe is a broader answer that might be helpful to particularly to the undergraduate and graduate students in the room. What I really wanted to do with this work was, and what I like to do with my work in general is I like to find projects that are driven by theoretical ideas and contemporary debates in my subfield, cultural geography. So materiality is huge in cultural geography right now. Making has just been building steam really fast. Enthusiasm is a relatively small study, but there's a couple really interesting papers. And I realized I could draw those three together. The thing of love and devotion came later, came when I realized how much heart was going into this and what this really meant. And then like the 39, Chief, he's been building that motorcycle for 20 years. You know, that's devotion. So that came later, and there's very little literature on that, but that was in the fourth one that we tied it to. So I sought to link, I saw that I could link these four areas of contemporary theoretical interest with a topic of empirical interest to me personally. I thought it was a cool topic, right? About motorcycles, cool, fun, right? So a fun topic, areas of contemporary debate that are interesting in the discipline or the self-discipline, and then my own methodological expertise is in qualitative research, so this fit in within that. So it satisfied all the key areas for me to make a paper that could be interesting. It had to forward empirical, methodological, and theoretical concerns. So that's the bigger answer. Yes?
Have you seen or studied the influence of internet on the way people like networking and interact with other people like you?
It's a terrific question. The influence of the internet. We were only able to mention that in like one word. We wrote about it pretty extensively in the paper that we published about the restoration of our car, because in that case, the internet mattered even more, because the car was a Czechoslovakian car made in 1941, so it's wartime, German-occupied Czechoslovakia. It was actually called Sudetenland. They changed the name of that part of the country. And then, of course, during the Cold War, it was the East Bloc. So had we been trying to restore our car before the fall of the wall, before the rise of the internet, forget it. We could have never gotten parts because we could have never gotten out of the East Bloc. And there was very limited language capability. But the wall fell down at just about the same time as the internet came up, right? And both of these things work together so that now the internet incredibly facilitates finding and acquiring all these things. It's still difficult. International shipping presents all kinds of challenges. Language issues always arise. A lot of foreign sellers don't want to ship internationally, so that you can buy something, you might have to fly there and then drive there to pick it up. So we wrote about pretty extensively about those challenges. But for anybody who's into restoration of anything, I mean, the first thing you do now is look for stuff on the internet, and it is the main source for finding anything. So it's been an absolute revolution in all areas of restoration.
Any other questions?
Yes?
Yeah.
Do you have plans to continue this line of research in the future, perhaps interviewing enthusiasts at different shows across the country? It seems almost to me it's kind of a ritual for enthusiasts and collective effervescence building off Durkheim's work a bit. That potentially could dive into.
Well, it's a really great point. So this question basically is, do I plan to continue this kind of work? What I'd really like to do is work together with, there's a geographer at University of Reading in the UK, Hilary Joghagen. She's the one who's written most of the work on enthusiasms. She's also published a paper in Cultural Geographies about object love among curators of museum collections. So people who really have to care so much for these museum objects that they love them. So that relates obviously to the work that I'm doing. But I really like, her work on enthusiasms has been extensive interviews with all kinds of enthusiasts. But she's not an enthusiast herself. Whereas my work has been about living inside cultures of enthusiasm, whether it's for the cars, motorcycles, or all the other junk. So what I'd like to do is work with her and bring those two perspectives together. So, and she's a good friend, so we're just trying to find the time to do it. Anybody else?
We will be hanging out after the session is over, and you guys can feel free to ask Dr. DeLyser any other questions you may have. But for now, please join me in giving her a big round of applause.
It's probably the first time you've ever seen somebody present a paper about their boyfriend, right? I thought it would be interesting to try.
I just can't stop picturing you with blonde dreadlocks.
There's a picture picture of me sitting on one of Paul's motorcycles like that, I could say.
Oh, it's going up on the event page. Thanks again, Dr. DeLyser. This has been awesome. All right, so before we conclude, number one, I have to present a couple of awards. We very surreptitiously, I don't know how sneaky we were yesterday, but a few of us were judging the poster competition that was right here in this room. And we have a couple of awards to give out for our top undergraduate poster presenters. And fortunately, two of them are in the room right now. The third is on his way back to Alabama, but we're very grateful that he was able to come up and join us. The three winners of the undergrad poster session are Connor Martin of University of North Alabama, and from our very own department, Alan Posey and Connor Vermilia. You guys can come on up. Some prizes are hammocks, sports, and thanks again, Connor and Alan. Congratulations. So we have, before we conclude, I was asked this morning by my very good friend and colleague, Matt Kerr, if he could speak to you guys for a few minutes. And I said, sure, there's absolutely no way this can backfire on me. So please, everyone, welcome Matt Kerr.
Tyler's actually worried because you can never tell if you're going to get the serious Matt Kerr or the volatile and unpredictable one. I took a bunch of Dayquil this morning, so I don't know either. So I've been called a lot of things, from founder of this event to you're an idiot, why did you do this to me? To paraphrase things that Tyler has said to me over the last couple of years. But back in 2012, I looked around at UT and our department and I said, we don't have a geography symposium. There's really something wrong with that because we have a lot to show off here and be proud of. So we started in fall 2012 with this idea and a talented group of people to have this biennial symposium. And leading up to the 2014 event, as I was slowly going crazy, as Tyler can attest happens, I said to some folks that if this goes off without a hitch, I will produce a solid gold brick. But I used more colorful metaphors at the time. So due to the hard work of many talented people on the 2014 team, it turned out better than I could have ever imagined. And now to see Tyler and Savannah and this group do this on the 2016 time, it really feels good. They had about a 30% growth over what we had in papers and posters. Same number of keynote lectures we'll be working on next year. This is strictly from the quantitative side. I'll keep with the science. So that's great. The only complaint that I have about this event is that there are no chicken fingers. And I think I specifically requested chicken fingers. So after the 2014 event, my good friend and colleague Joanne Ballard, who is also very artsy-crafty, remembered my saying that if this went well, I would need to account for the solid gold brick. So she gave me the Symposium 2014 brick of very surprising accomplishments. On the front, inscribed in magic marker, it says 2014, and on the bottom is my name spelled wrong. Thank you, Dr. Ballard. You can watch this on YouTube. So, Tyler, I spent a lot of time thinking about this last night. This chicken thing is pretty serious, but I've decided to let it go. So I want to present you and your crew with your own 2016 Symposium brick. If you could join me up here. Like the chicken fingers, the actual gold brick is not here today. But I have a regular brick. As a fraternity geographer, I'm all about proxy evidence, right? Yes. This is your proxy for you and your team doing an excellent job.
by rapidly running into a construction site and running back to his truck this morning. That's just what I'm imagining. But seriously, no, this does mean a lot, and to be not only a good colleague, but a very good friend to you. He's been one of the most interesting and best people I've gotten to know here in Tennessee. And I was really excited when, well, excited being the operative term, when we were at that GARG meeting in 2014, when we already knew in our department that we were going to keep this going as a biennial event in the department. And I said, well, I'll be here in 2016. I can head up the 2016 event. And I want to say that obviously I owe a lot, as I mentioned earlier, to Savannah Collins, my co-chair, Matt Kerr as our advisor, again, in a very reluctant advisory role, as an email like, Matt, how'd you do this in 2014? Like every day leading up to this. So he was a really good sport about that. Matt Cook as our event photographer and our web manager, so the events forms and all that stuff online. That is courtesy of him. Hannah Gunderman back there, Helen Roscoe, Joroge Katongo, Alyssa Haas, and Brooke Pearson as our undergrad representative, as well as Drs. Tran and Ellis for being wonderful advisors in the faculty. After we wrap up, we'd love for the committee to come up here so we can get some photo ops. But for now, thank you. Things like this make me very glad I chose to come to the University of Tennessee to get my PhD, and I'm really happy to be working with all of you. So enjoy the rest of your weekend. Have fun at whatever Super Bowl party. We have the GARG Super Bowl party. The grad students are actually going to have a Super Bowl party tomorrow night. But enjoy your Super Bowl Sundays and the rest of your spring semesters. Take care. Get home safe. Thank you.
Have a quick comment. Yeah. They have the brick and do some restoration. Make it go.
Yeah, I still got to send you that.
Hey,
Oh, from the.